All right, guys, so this is going to be your second example that we do. So to start the spreadsheet, to do example 2, we have this data set. We were wanting to find the distance between a couple of points, point 2 and point 1. We're going to want to find the distance between point 2 and multiple point 1s. So the first thing we need to do is we need to insert some cells so we can put our name and the date and all of those nice things. So name is date. And then our purpose, find distance between 2 points. So something else that might be useful is if someone's going to use a spreadsheet, you probably want them to understand what formula that you're using. So using the formula So that formula, I can write D equals x2 minus x1 to the second plus y2 minus y1 to the second. And then all of that to the half. So this tells us what we're doing, but it doesn't look very professional. So that's something we want to consider. And if we were going to send this out to client, we could remove all of these carets and we could go back in and we can change this using the format to make them superscripts for exponents and subscripts for our y1, y2. So if I went through into this, it takes me a little longer, but it looks a lot nicer, especially if I'm going to be doing this for somebody that's paying me. I probably want to do something like this. So it takes a bit, but it does make it look a lot nicer, and I think your client, if you were doing that, would really, really appreciate that. So, okay, so we get rid of that caret and we're good to go. So that's our formula. So now we're going to come over here and we're going to type that formula in. So equals, we want to do square root. So if I don't know what the function is for square root, so Excel has a bunch of built-in functions we've talked about. And I can click this function button and I can tell it what I want to do. So I want to find square root. So go, there it is. I'm going to click OK. And I don't want to deal with what they're doing here, but as you can see, the square root function is sqrt. So we can click OK. It doesn't like the way I did that, but I like to type this in manually. So I can either click that function button, or I can click or just type in square root, and it also starts populating as I'm going. So if I think it's what I know it's going to be, so let's say I want to find the minimum, that's an automatic function. If I want to sum something, there's an automatic function. There's a whole list of these on page 302 and 303 in your book, and then also 304. So if you want to go back and look at that, you can. So let's type in this formula again: square root of x2 minus x1. And we want to square that plus y2 minus y1. And I forgot to put my parentheses in, so I need to come back in here. It's going to follow the order of operations in Excel. So we would want to keep it like that. And so something else to note is this should be telling us which parentheses follow. So right now I have black parentheses here. So this parenthesis connects to this black parentheses. This one connects to this one. And this red one's connecting to nothing. So I want my square root to connect to that because I want to take the square root of the whole thing. So now you can see they changed to black. So these black ones are the square root function. The number in the middle is what we're doing inside of those parentheses. And the red parentheses are within that. So that's something to note. All right, so we found that distance. If we want to find some other distances, we could retype in the formula, almost exactly the same, or we could use what we learned in the last class where we just drag down, and that gives us the right answer, right? So let's go back and check that formula. No, it doesn't. So something else, when you click up in the bar, if you guys notice, it turns colors and it shows me what cells it's referencing. So I really want to continue to reference these two cells when I'm looking at this, because I'm still looking at the distance between this point and this point. So this is what we call a relative reference. And when we say relative reference, what a relative reference is that it refers to the cell in the same relative position to the cell of the formula, no matter where the cell is copied. So let's take this cell now and copy it just over here to this 0. And let's see what it's doing. So it's referencing exactly the same way. So the 6 was referencing these 2 points and these 2 points, and that's what it's doing. It's the same distance away. So that's what a relative reference is, and that's what it's doing. Okay, so let's say that I don't want to have to copy this down every time and change it over and over and over again, right? So over and over and over again, I could come here and I could, oh, that one actually copied down correctly. Actually, it copied the same thing. It's doing something strange. So let's just look at this one. We were looking at the wrong one. So see how it keeps dragging down? Let's say I don't want to do that. So there's what we call absolute addressing. So absolute addressing is indicated by the presence of a $sign immediately before both the column and the row designated. So absolute cell addresses always refer to the same cell in the formula if it's copied anywhere else. So we want the points, the X and Y points of point 2 to always be the same. So I can click in here and I can put in those $signs by pushing Shift F4 for both of those. Or a cool trick, I also need to do this for E11, is I can just hit F4 and it will do it for me automatically. So now when I copy this cell, it's always going to reference these 2 points. So let's just prove it to ourselves. And when we look at that, again, it's relative referencing the points from point 1. So this is the same distance as this is, but it's always going back to these 2 cells. And we forgot to drag that up, so that's another mistake we need to get fixed. So if I come over here and I drag these up to here, and I have both of them locked in there, it shows me that over and over again this is going to happen, and then I can just drag this down, and I've calculated the distances between all of these. So this is what we call relative addressing. Something else that we could do instead of that is we could have done what's called a mixed reference, or mixed addressing. So when I'm mixed addressing something, I only need one of them to stay the same. So maybe I only need the column to stay the same and not the row. So if I do that, then I can make it stick within one column or one row. So let's do that and then copy and paste that cell and see what happens. So if I copy and paste this cell over here, it's going to continue to reference cell D, D11 and E11, but it went down 1. So that's not as dramatic. Let's do a more dramatic one where we copy and paste that way over here. So now you'll see it's still going to be in D, but it's going to be further down. So D, and then this is relative reference. So that is the difference between absolute, mixed, and relative referencing. So that is a mixed reference. So let's take a look at, I mentioned that there's a whole bunch of functions, but let's take a look at some of those functions within this, within that chapter. So statistical functions in here, I can actually look at different packages within here. So I have financial ones that we may not care as much about. I also have date and time ones, which will tell me different things about the day, not as important. Math and trig, these are some good ones. So there's absolute value. And so this tells you that it wants the absolute value of a number. So it's just going to return the absolute value of a number given its sign. There's the arc cosine, arc cosh. We can look at all these things. Some other good ones in here. Let me see. We can convert radians to degrees. So Excel always works in radians and not degrees. So that's something to note and for the future. I can look at the log 10. I can look at a bunch of different things. We can take something to the power. We can find the quotient. We can do a bunch of these different things. We can do sum. We can sum if it meets a certain criteria. We can find the product. So a bunch of these different things. We can also do statistical data. So we can take the average. So it doesn't give us the mean. Mean is not a function within here, if you'll notice. There is no mean. There's a median, and there's a max, and there's a min. But there is the average deviation. There's also standard deviation, which will come in handy for us later. And a lot of these different functions. Let's see what else there is. There's lookup stuff, database stuff, text stuff, logical. Oh, there's an engineering set of calculations. So I have never actually looked at these. This is interesting to me. So there's a bunch of different, we can make things into hexadecimal numbers. We can look at imaginary numbers. And we can look at octant. Okay, so this is really just doing something. So this is pretty interesting. We have our own set of things for just engineers. information. But you can go in here and play with these cells, look at the cells, your book lists the things that are most common that are used, or miscellaneous functions that are important for you guys to use maybe. So sometimes we get errors. So sometimes we may have something where we're dividing by, let's say, something else. So it's giving me an error. So this error, if you look on page 304, it gives you several of the errors. They start on 303 and they end on 304. So this one is hashtag, or also known as #, div 0. So it means that the formula has resulted in a division by 0. Some other errors you might see. You may see something like this, where there's just a bunch of £signs. Let me get there. There we go. So this normally will be a whole bunch of £signs. So if this was a huge number, let's just go ahead and make this to the 8th so that we can see this error. This means that this cell is not wide enough. So if I double click, then it will show me that it's wide enough. So that hashtag sign means the column is not wide enough to display the number, and it gives you how to fix that. Some other common ones I see, the value contains invalid data types. So if I would have put in the letter I here, or let's just make it I here, then it's going to give me this hashtag value, which means the formula contains something wrong. So I can go back and look into this formula and see what's wrong, and it's because this is an I. So if I do that back to a number, it will be fine. So there's a good way to look at that, and there's several things you can do in there to look into that. Those errors. So those are just some good things. So that is what we're going to do for now. In class on Monday, we'll go over some more of this, and then also start to look into logic and conditional statements and look up and some more fun things. So I hope you guys are enjoying this.